I would talk a little bit about breaking down some black walnut. This is a spoon log I've got here. In Kansas City where we live, this tree literally grows like a weed. Look, this is a black walnut tree sprouted up in our yard. And it's available at a log dump near you for free, most likely, if you live in this part of the country. And so this one is not walnut, this is crabapple. But what I'm going to try to show is how I will strategically go after this kind of concentric bullseye pattern of the grain that our customers love, and we just can't keep these stocked. So as long as we have plenty of material, we will err on the side of getting fewer blanks that are more beautiful, essentially. Here's some black walnut that I have roughed out that I carved into the Heartwood side of the blank rather than the sapwood side. So this spoon was oriented in the log. In fact, this spoon was carved from the other half of this very log. It was oriented in here like this, and I was careful to incorporate that Heartwood sapwood boundary right through the handle as best I could. Now, if it has a subtle curve here, which is kind of ergonomic for a serving spoon like this, if that curve had been the opposite, then I would have carved into the opposite side. So what I was going after was to get this ergonomic curve. You can carve your spoon bowl into either side, but I'm going to go after my high value blanks are going to be having this boundary run right up the middle. So I'm going to use some wedges and a little hammer and just get the maximum number of this style of blanks I can out of there. I guess I have this right here. A couple other quick notes on grain orientation and getting visually pleasing patterns out of it. This is mimosa, but exactly the same thing here, the lighter colored sapwood. So this was carved into the bark side, and anytime I can do that, I do that because these spoons sell faster. And then if you've ever made bowls, you may already know that by carving into the bark side, and this is black walnut here, so this bowl resided in a log not too much smaller than that. In this very orientation, you can see the growth rings go like this, and no, sorry, I'm incorrect. The growth rings actually go like this, and this was carved into the bark side. So in general, anytime you carve into the bark side, the outside of the log, you get this concentric pattern of growth rings. So the high value stuff for me is this boundary. So I want to get as many large-ish spoon blanks that I can that have that boundary running right through the middle of them. I may get some other blanks incidentally out of this. I don't really care about those very much. I have several more of these walnut logs to get through before they get weathered to bits out here in the yard. So I just want to get the very best of what's in here and get those into a protected state so that they're stable for the future and not wasted. So I just have a little 3-pound hammer and a steel splitting wedge that is reasonably well tuned up. So this can't have a big secondary bevel here or anything like that, or it won't split like this. The size of this particular log looks like I can get 4 of these high value blanks out of here. So basically I'm just going to split it in half and then split it in half again. If there were big drying cracks already started in there, I would go into those cracks, but I don't see those yet. If it's a little difficult to split, you might want to get a slightly bigger hammer. It's always helpful to have a second wedge on hand too. Go. With walnut, you can see this green color is indicative that part of the wood has not started to dry out yet. All right, once again, I'm looking at this. I have an option here to split off a chunk in this dimension and get a blank here, or I can split it this way and probably lose that additional blank. So I'm going to take off this center section, and I'm not splitting straight across, but I'm splitting to more or less follow the growth rings. You have to score where you want it to start, or it'll do something probably more random than you would like. Okay, that's great. I look here. For this blank, I'll have this little cluster of pin knots that I can make a feature in the bowl. Good stuff. All right. And then continuing along, split that roughly in half. So that's pretty darn chunky for a single spoon blank. And certainly if I split that right in the middle, I could have one Heartwood blank and one sapwood blank, and nobody wants those plain vanilla looking sapwood spoons. I can try to split off some of that sapwood. I'll save myself some hatchet or bandsaw work. I didn't split all the way to the end, and that's very typical that the split is running toward the bark there, because this section is thinner than this. So I'll flip that over. Ouch. There we are. Waste, keep. And then repeat. Go. Looks good. And I'll do the exact same process on this log quarter, but let me show the blank that I want to get out of this piece of what would otherwise be waste. In general, splitting blanks like this, to get your splits to run straight and not veer off to the side, it's helpful to typically go right near half and half. So this thickness and this thickness should be about the same, and your split should run fairly even. Interesting stuff going on in there. In splitting blanks, you really get to see what the grain is really doing, all of its directionality. This is waste. This is the centermost portion of the log right here, the pith. And yeah, on a log this size, 1 to 2 inches of that innermost material I want to avoid, because as this dries, it's very likely to have natural drying splits run from that centermost portion radially outward. So that's firewood, and we're off with some very high quality spoon blanks here. And I'll just repeat that and hopefully double my number of blanks. Okay, so out of that walnut log half, I got 6 very high quality, 4 two-tone and 2 Heartwood spoon blanks. If I'm going to carve these with blades, with hand tools, I can start right away, and axe, knife, draw knife, whatever various tools. If I want to keep them in this full moisture state, I can buy myself a few days with either a plastic garbage bag or like a tight plastic tote with a tight fitting lid. If you just put them in there, then the moisture won't be able to escape appreciably. But if you leave them in there too long, they're going to mold. So you have just a few days to get to that. If you want to keep some green wood on hand for carving whenever you want it, you can wrap these up either together or individually in a garbage bag, put them in a freezer, and that will keep them as long as you want, and pull it out a few hours or the night before you want to do some carving, and you're good to go. For my purposes, these are mostly going to be power carved, so I'm going to trim the ends probably about 1 inch off each end until I'm sure that any of the drying cracks that have already started are cut away. I'm going to dip each end in melted paraffin wax and make sure I get good adhesion of that wax, and then put them somewhere like in a basement or a shady shed where they're not going to dry out too fast, and they're probably fine, and I could leave them like that, just rough split like this. Or my typical process is to just clean up the really gnarly split bits with a bandsaw. So something that's not going to give me splinters when I try to handle it later, something that's a little more physically compact. But that's how to break down the log and get the best of what's in there for the purpose of making spoons anyway. Here are my 6 blanks all cleaned up off the bandsaw. You can also use a hatchet or a draw knife to clean them up thusly, but notice what I have in each case where I can have that nice boundary built in. There it is. And a lot of times I go ahead and put in whatever subtle curve that will give the shape to the spoon and its side profile. That's sawn into there as well. You can axe that and draw knife that in as well. That's it. My ends are waxed. I'm going to date these. I don't have my pencil on me, but I'm going to make sure I write today's date on them so that I know about how long they've been drying before I decide to carve anything out of them in the future.